She was 8 years old when she noticed her, staring back at her through the smudged window of the car, silent, eyes wide and wild, a woman who looked exactly like her mother, though the face was dirtied, the skin sunken, the clothes tattered. "Daddy, look, Mommy," she squealed, pointing with trembling fingers. Her father's white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel loosened as his gaze swiveled between his daughter's innocent face and the apparition on the sidewalk. The driver's seat of the black sedan was too far forward. The tinted glass created a thin curtain between him and the street. But in that moment, he didn't care. She was chasing after a ghost. The image of his wife had been seared into his memory since the day she vanished, and now, 10 years later, he glimpsed her. Or so his mind wanted to believe. The car idled at the traffic light. The father knelt down, pulling his daughter onto his lap so they were both eye level with the glass. Her brown eyes, so like her mother's, glittered with excitement. She wagged her finger again. "Look, Daddy. She's Mommy." He exhaled, slowly as the light turned green. He stepped on the gas, leaving the sidewalk behind. The image, once clear, blurred as they sped off. But the memory of that face, just like his wife's, tormented him. He tried to dismiss it. Street performers. Actors' faces change over time. He told himself there was no way it could be her, but what if it was? He couldn't push away the hope it ignited deep in his chest. They arrived at the country club driveway, the place he called work, where people shook his hand, congratulated him on quarterly profits, and asked about his life. His perfect life. He smoothed his tie, parked the car, and held the door open for his daughter. She skipped ahead as she always did, full of joy and wonder. He watched her go, a rare smile on his face for a second. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He saw it was his assistant. He pocketed it and followed his daughter's laugh as she ran toward the entrance. By the time he reached the lobby, she was already following a group of children into the golf cart that would take them to the summer camp activities. He knelt down again, gave her a quick hug, then released her. She waved goodbye. He straightened, brushed a finger through his carefully combed hair, and proceeded into the glass-encased office. Thousands of files awaited his approval. Meetings, proposals, budgets. Couldn't think of a thing except that face. Was it melting like a mirage? Or was it really her? He shook his head to clear it and stepped into the boardroom. Inside, his board members chatted about the new real estate acquisition. He sat at the head, closed his eyes for a moment, tried to drown out the memory, then opened them and started the meeting as though nothing had happened. The voice that counted revenue, cut deals, and ran corporations rose and fell over spreadsheets. But his mind drifted to a street corner 2 miles from here. When the meeting ended, he escaped back to his office. He dialed his assistant. "Find the camera footage from the intersection of Maple and 4th yesterday afternoon around 3:15. I need to know everything about any transient women in that area." He kept his voice calm, but inside he was shaking. "Yes, anything. Email it to me immediately." He hung up and watched the clock. 45 minutes passed. He drummed his fingers on the mahogany desk. Finally, an email popped up with a download link. He clicked. The video file opened. He recognized the intersection immediately. A garbage can overflowed in the corner. A newspaper fluttered across the asphalt. People walked past, chatting on their phones, oblivious to the homeless woman on the sidewalk who looked straight at the camera. He zoomed in. Her face, gaunt, hair tangled, eyes wide and pleading. Tears tracked down her cheeks. He replayed the clip. She raised a hand as if waving to someone out of frame. He slowed the video. The traffic light turned yellow. He pressed freeze frame. The face was unmistakable, though twisted by hardship. Same high cheekbones, same proud nose, same soft lips. 10 years of struggle had etched deep lines into her face, but that was his wife. How could it be anyone else? He sank into the leather chair, phone pressed to his ear. "Get me Detective Morales." His heart pounded. The detective had been in charge of the original missing person investigation. Detective Morales' voice crackled in his ear. "Is it true? You found something?" "Yes," he whispered. Send 2 units to that intersection. It's her." The tears came, unbidden. He listened as Morales asked questions, took down the address where he would meet them, promised that they would follow up. The father hung up, wiped his eyes, and stared at the screen. She was alive. She had been living on the streets for a decade. 10 years since she woke one morning, got the coffee ready for her husband, kissed her daughter on the forehead and told them she would be back before lunch. A call, a deal gone wrong, a betrayal. It was like a slow slide down a slope of despair. First, she lost her job. She and her husband had argued over finances. In the argument, she ran out into the street, tears blinding her. A driver hit her, and although she survived, her memory fractured. A long hospital stay blurred the days. By the time she recovered, she had no job, no home. She and her husband tried to find her, peers at the office, detectives, calls to friends. But her memory refused to cooperate. She wandered, sometimes, remembering a daughter's laugh, a husband's eyes. But the faces melded, the names slipped away like droplets of water on a hot stone. She ended up on the streets of the city, sleeping in abandoned buildings, rummaging in trash bins for food. Sometimes she begged, but mostly she drifted, always searching for a home that existed only in her mind. She became invisible. She had a name once, a name her husband whispered at night, a name that his daughter would shout when she spotted her. But in the past 10 years, no one called that name. Her clothes were layers of rags, her hair a tangled wild halo. She ate what she could, slept when she could, and spent her days trying to remember the names of people she had forgotten. Her dreams brought flashbacks of lighter times, a vibrant woman in a kitchen, arms swirling, bathing her daughter in love. She tried to chase the images, but her mind pulled them away, always one step ahead. She accepted the street as her only reality. She was a ghost, but the universe had other plans. Everything changed on that humid summer afternoon at the intersection of Maple and 4th. The traffic had slowed at the red light. She cupped her hands to her mouth and called out to a woman crossing the street, begging her for spare change. The woman ignored her. She bowed her head in shame and looked up to see a young girl, no more than 8, pointing at her through the tinted window of a black sedan. "Daddy, look! Mommy!" The words sliced through her like a blade. She froze, her heart pounding. She stared at the window in wonder. She remembered that voice. She felt it deep inside her chest. Her legs trembled. She reached out with a shaking finger, but the car drove away before she could process. She collapsed onto the curb, sobbing. The newspapers and trash swirled around her ankles. A teenage boy in a hoodie kicked a soda can past her. She didn't care. She sat on the curb, her tears mixing with the dirt. She felt something ripple inside, a trembling that she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to chase the car, claw at the window, scream that she was alive. But she was dirty, ragged, and people would just kick her more. So she stayed on the curb, crying until her tears dried on her cheeks. Later that night, in a dark alley, she tried to remember. Her hands trembled as she clutched the cold brick wall. She ran through every memory fragment until she found the image of her daughter's face, bright brown eyes, curly hair, that laugh. She screamed until her voice cracked. She pressed her hands to her temples. "I want them," she whispered. "I want them." Her mind swirled. She needed proof. She needed to find them. She needed to prove she was their mother. Detective Morales met them at the scene early the next morning. The father paced on the sidewalk. His daughter was at his side, but they hadn't told her anything. She wore a bright yellow sundress, her curls bouncing as she hopped from foot to foot. Her father tried to smile, but his eyes darted to the empty intersection. He saw the shattered window glass still reflecting the dawn sun. He shivered. He held his daughter's hand, even though she tugged down to ask why they had driven so far. He knelt down, looked into her wide eyes. "Can you be very quiet with me?" She nodded. He brushed a curl from her face. "Something important happened yesterday. I need you to help me find someone." She nodded again, brow furrowed. He stood, grabbed her hand, and motioned toward him, a small park a block away. As they walked, he whispered in her ear, "Maybe we saw someone who looks a lot like me and you." She squeezed his hand. "Mommy." Her voice trembled. He swallowed. "Maybe." The detective walked up, shook the father's hand. "Sir, we pulled the footage. We believe it's her." He handed over a printout of still frames. The homeless woman at the light looking straight into the camera. The father recognized every curve of her face. "I thought she was gone forever." His voice cracked. "But it's her." He stared at the paper. His knees buckled. He closed his eyes. Detective Morales caught him. "Sir." The father let out a choked sob. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded photograph of his wife and daughter. 10 years ago, a portrait snapped at the beach. The mother wore a sun hat, arms wrapped around her husband. The little girl giggled, water at her feet. He held the photo against his chest as though it would protect him. His daughter peered at the image, then looked up at him. "Is that Mommy?" She reached for the photo. He shook his head, tears spilling. "Not right now, sweetie." She frowned but let it go. Detective Morales guided him inside the park. They sat on a bench. The daughter twirled a strand of her hair. "Are we going to find her?" she asked softly. The father nodded. "Yes, we're going to bring her home." He reached out, stroked her hair. "Will you help me, baby?" "Yes," she said, eyes brimming with tears. He kissed her forehead. The detective drove them to the precinct. The father clutched the evidence printouts, the photograph pressed inside his jacket. The detective placed a box of sandwiches on the seat between them. "You must be hungry," he said. The father shook his head, too overwhelmed to eat. His daughter poked at the tomato on her sandwich. "Can I have ketchup?" she asked. He glanced at the detective. "Go ahead, kiddo." She dug into the lunch as though nothing happened. Meanwhile, the detective paged through case files. "Your wife was reported missing 10 years ago, correct?" The father nodded. "She left for work and never returned." The detective sighed. She jotted something in her notebook. "I reopened the case as soon as I saw the footage. I've put out APBs, notified all nearby shelters, hospitals. If she was brought in anywhere, we'll find her." The father nodded again. He felt miles away, heat rising in his face. 10 years of silence, 10 years of grief, and now this impossible miracle. He had trouble breathing. His daughter finished the sandwich, wiped her mouth with the sleeve of her dress. She looked at the detective. "Are you going to find her?" The detective smiled gently. "We're going to try our best." The daughter leaned back in the seat. "Okay." She sat quietly. The detective excused himself to check on phone calls. The father and daughter waited in the empty office. The walls were gray cinder blocks, flickering fluorescent lights. The father rubbed his temples, closed his eyes. His daughter nestled against him. He held her close. She looked up at him, her small face wet with tears. "I miss her," she whispered. He choked back a sob. "I miss her too, sweetheart." He pressed a kiss on her forehead. "But we're going to bring her home." That afternoon, the detective received a call. A shelter on the outskirts of town phoned in. A woman matching the description had arrived 2 days ago asking for help. She didn't speak much but kept crying. "I need my family." The detective grabbed his badge and radioed for backup. He asked the father to put his daughter in the car, drove them to the shelter. As they turned onto the dusty road leading to the grim building, the father's breath caught. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His mind reeled. Would she even remember him? Would she remember their daughter? Or was she so broken that she no longer recognized the life she once had? They pulled up to the shelter, a low brick building with barred windows. A sign above the door read, "Open Hearts Shelter." A volunteer greeted them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "You must be family of the patient," she said softly, leading them to a small room. His daughter clung to his leg. He knelt, wiped her tears. "Honey, stay close." The volunteer opened the door. Inside, in a narrow cot by the window, sat the woman. Her thin legs protruded beneath a ragged blanket. The sunlight spilled across her sorrowful face. She looked up, her eyes darting between the father and his daughter. Her lips trembled as tears welled. She whispered a name, but her voice was faint. The father's breath caught. She recognized him. He took a step forward. She gasped. The daughter reached out to her mother. "Mommy!" The woman froze, her eyes widening. The daughter ran to her, flung her arms around her mother's waist. The woman buried her face in the girl's dress, her arms wrapping around the child's tiny frame. She sobbed. The father knelt beside them, hands trembling. He placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. She looked up, her eyes scanning his face. Confusion, disbelief, sorrow, longing. He whispered, "It's me." He swallowed hard, voice thick. "I'm here." She stared at him, tears streaming. Recognition ignited in her eyes. She let go of their daughter and reached out, trembling, to touch his face. "You're real," she whispered, as though afraid it was a dream. He nodded, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I'm here for you now." She collapsed, against him, sobbing as though her heart would break, as though 10 years of pain would descend in that moment. The daughter had no words. She stood between them, touching her mother's face with both hands, marveling that the woman who stared back at her was once strangers. "Mommy," she repeated, tears streaming. The flock of volunteers waited outside the door, silent witnesses. The detective stepped back, letting them have privacy. She clung to her daughter like a lifeline, inhaling her scent, tasting tears on her cheek. The daughter pressed her face into her shoulder, arms tightening. "I've missed you," the daughter whispered, small voice wavering. The woman rocked her back and forth. "I've missed you too," she choked. She looked at her husband. "I'm so sorry." His voice was gentle. "You don't need to apologize. You're home now." She nodded, but her eyes clouded. "What happened to me?" she asked, reaching for his hand. He swallowed. "How do you explain 10 years of horror? How do you bridge a decade of silence? You had an accident, you lost your memory. You wandered. I looked everywhere. I never gave up on you." She shook her head, tears streaming. 10 years. He kissed her forehead. "We'll take it one day at a time." She closed her eyes as though hesitating to accept the words, then nodded. "I want to go home." He smiled, though tears blurred his vision. "We'll go home." The ride back to the mansion felt surreal. Their old home, once a place of laughter, now seemed haunted. The driver flew down the highway. The daughter pressed her face against the window, gazing at the passing trees. She felt new emotions, excitement, anxiety, hope. She glanced between her parents. Her mother, pale and fatigued, watched the sky as though it held a million questions. Her father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, lost in thought. She reached for her mother's hand. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her mother's eyes filled with tears again. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if I'm not the same?" The daughter squeezed her hand. "You're my mommy." The mother's tears fell freely. She stroked the daughter's hair. "I'm sorry I missed so much." She turned her gaze to her husband. "I'm sorry." The father's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Shh," he said. "We'll talk about everything later." She nodded. The mansion loomed ahead. White pillars, manicured lawns, fountain in the center. It was a palace compared to the grim shelter. As they pulled into the drive, familiar faces emerged. Neighbors, staff, the gardener, the butler, all who had assumed the wife was dead. They descended from the car, the father leading the way. then the daughter, then the mother, supported by the detective. The butler knelt before them. "Mrs. Thompson, is it really you?" His voice cracked. She nodded, tears in her eyes. She wanted to laugh with joy, but also to scream at the injustice of the past decade. The gardener pressed a hand to his heart. She reached out, touched his arm. "Thank you for tending the garden." He bowed his head. "It was my honor, madam." They stepped inside. The grand foyer, the marble floors, the sweeping staircase. Everything felt foreign. She ran her fingers along the banister, white paint smooth beneath her fingertips. They guided her into the living room. Warm sunlight poured through the tall windows onto the Persian rug. She sank onto the velvet sofa, exhaustion consuming her. Her husband knelt beside her, wiping her tears. "You're safe now." He kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes. "I need to rest." He nodded, helped her to a guest bedroom upstairs. Meanwhile, the daughter skipped around the house, peeking into rooms. She found her old bedroom, pink walls, stuffed animals on the bed, drawings taped to the corkboard. She ran her hand over the quilt, tracing the embroidered butterflies. Her eyes widened with delight. "Mommy, look." She picked up a teddy bear, hugged it to her chest. She missed her life the way a fish misses water. The father watched from the doorway, pride and pain warring in his eyes. When the mother woke, the room was dimly lit. She blinked, groggy. Her husband sat in the chair by the window, reading a file. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. He stood, crossed the room, wrung her hand. "How do you feel?" She swallowed. Confused. He pulled a chair beside her. "You're safe and home. I'll never leave you again." She closed her eyes, letting the words seep in. She envisioned the streets, the dark alleys, the cold. A wave of grief crashed over her. "I'm so sorry." He brushed her hair back. "It's not your fault." She peered at him. His hair was grayer, his eyes more tired. She saw strain etched in his face. "You've been raising her alone?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, you missed her entire childhood." She gasped. 10 years, she whispered. He nodded. "But she never stopped talking about you." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small music box he had kept hidden. He opened it and a lullaby drifted out. Her daughter's lullaby. The melody hit her like a thunderbolt. She stared at the tiny ballerina twirling on its platform. She reached out, cradled it in her hands. Tears fell onto it. "I almost forgot." She closed her eyes, stricken. "I'm so sorry." Over the next weeks, she relearned everything. She listened to stories, how their daughter had grown, her first day of school, her first bicycle ride, her birthday parties. She recognized her daughter's laugh, her father's voice. Sometimes she would sit in silence, tears tracing lines down her cheeks as she tried to catch the fleeting memories as they floated in and out of reach. She walked through the house, reacquainted with every room. She stepped onto the balcony for the first time since coming home, looked out at the city skyline, so different from the cramped alleys she had known. She felt both joy and guilt. Joy that she was free, guilt for every day she had been lost. Her daughter reveled in her presence. She showered her mother with questions, stories, and endless hugs. She showed her mother her toys, her schoolwork, taught her the words she liked to say. The mother laughed, a clear, bright sound. In the middle of the drawing room, it felt like music. The father watched them, heart full. He kissed his wife one morning as she brushed her daughter's hair and whispered, "Thank you." She smiled, tears brimming. "Thank you for holding on." At night, the three of them sat in the living room, the fire crackling in the hearth. The living room had become a place of whispered confessions and tender moments. The mother would gaze at her husband, then at her daughter. Sometimes she would cry with sorrow at all she had missed. Sometimes she would laugh with pure joy, as though she could burst. The daughter would snuggle between them, feeling the love in that moment, knowing they were a family again. But healing was not linear. One afternoon, she decided to visit the intersection where she had seen her daughter's face. Her husband drove her. The detective had arranged for the police to close the street temporarily so she could walk without fear. She stepped onto the sidewalk, feet trembling. The trash cans, the cracked pavement, the flickering streetlight, they were all still there. The same corner where her life had changed. She knelt down and touched the ground. Memories flooded back. A car rushing toward her, the pain, the confusion. She closed her eyes. The sound of voices faded. For a moment she felt that old terror surge inside her. She opened her eyes and saw her husband standing behind her, hand on her shoulder. She squeezed his hand, pressing her cheek into his fingers. "What do you feel?" he asked softly. She took a breath. "Like I'm looking at my past and present at the same time." He nodded. "You survived. You're home." She let her tears fall. He wrapped his arm around her. Their daughter ran up to her, jumped into her arms. "Mommy, I'm so glad you're here." She kissed her daughter's hair. "Me too, sweetie." Back at home, they celebrated with a small party. The staff had baked a cake. Balloons dotted the halls. Friends brought flowers. Her mother-in-law, who had never given up hope, embraced her. Her sister came. Tears in her eyes, clutched her hands, marveled at every feature of her face. It was a day of laughter and tears. Tears for what had been lost. Tears of gratitude for what had been found. She looked around the crowd, heart bursting. She hadn't known how much pain she carried until she felt it lift. Time passed. She attended therapy sessions to recover her memory, but she also spent days just being with her daughter. They baked cookies, painted pictures, walked in the garden. She watched her father, once a solitary man consumed by work, become a devoted father and husband again. He would host business dinners, but he always made time to tuck his daughter into bed, read her stories, kiss her goodnight. She would watch them together from the kitchen doorway, tears of joy in her eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky pink and gold, she sat on the porch with her daughter. The girl dangled her legs off the edge, humming a tune. The mother smiled. Her daughter turned to her. "Mommy, are you happy?" The mother swallowed. "So happy." The daughter leaned into her. "I love you." The mother kissed her forehead. "I love you too, sweetie." Inside, her husband poured 2 glasses of lemonade. He sat beside them. "Tell me about your day." The mother recounted how she had walked past her old haunts, how the neighbors had stared. She talked about the overwhelming feeling of being seen again. Her husband listened, nodding, feeling every word as though it was etched onto his heart. When she finished, he took her hand. "You're stronger than you know." She looked into his eyes, gratitude shining there. "You saved me." He shook his head. "You saved me." Months later, she visited the shelter to thank the volunteers who had cared for her. She wore a simple dress and fresh makeup. She walked into the common room, heads turned. Some were surprised, others wept. She stood before them, voice trembling. "I'm alive because of you," she said. She told them of her journey, of the hollow years, and how a glimpse of her daughter's face had brought her back. The volunteers applauded, tears falling. One man, a former addict who had found his own strength through her example, stood and hugged her. She felt whole for the first time in years. She promised to return, to help them, to share her story. The detective visited her at home one afternoon. She was reading to her daughter in the nursery, the walls painted pastel green. She looked up at him, eyes bright. "I obtained records from the hospital that treated you before your memory loss," he said. She nodded. He handed her a folder. "They found evidence of someone who might have attacked you, the person who caused your amnesia. We can pursue charges if you want." She opened the folder, examined the report. A man with a record for assault, someone who had followed her home from work that day. He had been acquitted for lack of evidence. She closed the folder. She stared at his face. He waited. She sighed. "I don't want revenge," she said softly. "I want to live my life." He nodded. "I understand. But if you change your mind—" She shook her head, a small smile. "I won't." He stood, clapped his hands gently. "I'm glad." He paused, then said, "It's good to see you happy." She nodded, returned to her daughter, closed the book. Her daughter yawned, curled into her lap. She kissed her head. She looked at the man beside her, gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you." He squeezed her shoulder, then walked out. On her daughter's 9th birthday, they hosted a small garden party. The lawn was dotted with balloons, tables laid with cupcakes, and lemonade. Children ran around, laughter echoing. She watched from the edge of the garden, her husband behind her. She held her daughter's hand as they walked together through the party. She knelt in front of her daughter, presented a simple gift, a locket with a picture of them three inside. Her daughter's eyes widened. "Mommy, it's beautiful." She opened the locket, fingers trembling. The father joined them, smiling, as the daughter hugged her mother. Later that afternoon, as the golden sun dipped beyond the horizon, they gathered in the living room. The daughter sat between her parents, holding the locket. She pressed it to her heart. "This is our family," she said. Her mother's eyes brimmed. "Yes," she whispered. Her father kissed her cheek, then guided her to rest her head on his shoulder. Their daughter leaned into them, and for a moment, the three of them sat in silence, hearts beating as one. The road ahead would not be without challenges. She would have anniversaries of her disappearance when the grief came rushing back, threatening to pull her under. She would sometimes wake in the night, drenched in sweat, reliving her time on the streets. But she would face those moments with her family by her side. She had learned that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Her daughter's laughter, her husband's devotion, the support of friends and volunteers, they gave her the strength to stand. And as the sun set on that perfect day, she closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of her family surrounding her. For the first time in 10 years, she felt at peace, a broken woman made whole, a mother who had found her way home.